Karen glances at the sky through large office windows as she walks down a lavish corridor. Flitting from cloud to cloud, her mind muddles over the meeting she has set up, and how the overcast afternoon coincides with her disgruntled mindset. Turning sharp to her right, she affirms herself in what she is vying for, and counts down the remaining office doors in her trek.
Hello there, Karen. Sorry we had to put this meeting on the burning island for a bit. Big things going on, you know?
The big guy croaks out as she enters the office and gingerly makes her way to the chair across his desk.
Now what seems to be the issue you want to chat over?
The boss man seems to be very crisp today, not to her advantage.
Sir, I felt I needed to address the recent promotion of Bill to the office I had requested some time ago. It seems to me...
Yes, Bill! Great guy, you know? I knew from the moment I met him, or heard about him. Whatever the case, he was going places for sure.
The head honcho interrupted to pontificate on an employee that Karen just realized he has never met.
Yes, sir, but that is why it is so pertinent I talk with you. Bill is great at what he does, but I would like to remind you of the extended line of work I have participated in just over the last year. My experience, education, and diversity far outweigh Bill's resume from all angles.
Corinne, my dear, I understand all that. But I will remind you that you were placed in your current position for very specific reasons. You meet our agenda well, and you know that we don't have anyone else to fill your shoe in the same way.
Karen takes a thoughtful pause, and softly takes the discussion in a different direction.
That is very true, sir. No one can fill my position's current requirements. But I'm curious, why does it seem I am not even being considered for Bill's new position whatsoever?
The executive head furrows his brow and responds with his own question.
Are you participating in Pride this summer, Miss Karen? I should think so. It is still the summer of Pride, like that pretty lady on the TV said, right?
Just Karen is fine, sir, and yes, but...
Furthermore, and then Brad. He's a cool guy, you know? You have pride, so does he. But he has a different pride. It's in his work. He does good work. But after work, he has humility. He doesn't flaunt it around all over the front lawn. Bud doesn't need a pat on the back. He knows what he does is tip-top, and he always meets the mark. Do you always hit the mark, Lady Karen?
No one always hits the mark, sir.
Perhaps, but like I tell my sons, if you don't hit your mark the first time, take a break, re-strategize, and come at that guy from a different angle. And Biff does that for us.
So there is nothing I can offer you to perhaps change your mind?
My mind is a steel box, little lady. Nothing gets in or out. And when it comes to Brian, you would do well to follow his lead. Your resume, degrees, diversity, and whatnot mean nothing if you don't have pride in your work and humility in your demeanor. I know all this isn't what you want to hear, but whatever you're doing with your hair, it smells delicious.
The top dog then stood and started to pace the room, muttering to himself. Karen knew from experience there was no avail. The meeting was over, and she walked out in the exact state of mind she came in with. Welcome to Casual Reality. I'm your host, Seth Hudson. If I sound a little out of breath, I just got finished changing my CV axle, brake rotors, and pads. So I'm still a little greasy, still a little tired, but now that project is done, time to get to work. I have to start by saying that I was hoping Donald Trump would give his signature big cheese grin for his Fulton County mugshot, but the angry wizard look is acceptable. That being said, I need someone to remind me what summer 2023 was supposed to be all about.
Hello, my name is Admiral Rachel Levine, and I have the honor of being the Assistant Secretary for Health at the United States Department of Health and Human Services. Happy Pride! Happy Pride Month, and actually, let's declare it a Summer of Pride. Happy Summer of Pride. It's so important to have Pride as a celebration for our LGBTQI+ community and to recognize how far we have come, but also how much work we have left to do.
I'm not 100% sure I quite understand the message he was putting forth. Perhaps someone else can give me a little more insight.
Hi, it's me, Patti Gonia, a real-life homosexual. And today I'm here with the North Face. We are here to invite you to come out in nature with us! Wow, this is nice! We like to call this little tour the Summer of Pride. So come outside and celebrate the beautiful LGHGTV community. That's pretty gay.
Ah, got it. Well, in light of that concept, I guess let's review some happenings during the 2023 Summer of Pride. So first up, Trudeau and Canada as a whole extended Pride from June all the way through September. Next we have Glamour magazine UK edition with their trans woman? Pregnant man? Look, it's a woman who's pregnant who's pretending to be a man. How about that? That wraps it up. Don't stare at that too long. Next, the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. They were invited to Dodger Stadium for some sort of community service honor because they dress up weird and put on shows with deviant sexual activity for families and children. A public library in Washington, D.C. put on a pride parade for children ages 0 to 18. Then, of course, you have the indomitable White House with a pride flag front and center between two American flags I guess they threw up there for posterity's sake. And who could forget the fallout from the Dylan Mulvaney Bud Light Can from AB InBev, which caused Bud Light as a brand to drop out of the #1 selling slot of crappy beer and overall lose about $27 billion plus in market value.
I'm bringing it up because what transpired from that video was more bullying and transphobia than I could have ever imagined. And I should have made this video months ago, but I didn't. And I was scared, and I was scared of more backlash, and I felt personally guilty for what transpired, so I patiently waited for things to get better. But surprise, they haven't really. And I was waiting for the brand to reach out to me, but they never did. And for months now, I've been scared to leave my house. I have been ridiculed in public. I've been followed, and I have felt a loneliness that I wouldn't wish on anyone. And I'm not telling you this because I want your pity. I am telling you this because if this is my experience from a very privileged perspective, know that it is much, much worse for other trans people. For a company to hire a trans person and then not publicly stand by them is worse, in my opinion, than not hiring a trans person at all.
And here we have what caused the Target big box store boycott, which lost them somewhere around $9 billion plus in market value. So you have the lots of room for tucking. That's great. And then you have the phobia cure. Overall, that shirt doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I have yet to meet anyone who has a phobia of trans people. Maybe it's just me. Apparently Meta, which is Facebook's parent company, co-opted with a group to create a VR LGBT museum. So you get your VR goggles and you tour this museum online. The last little event here of the summer, I personally took offense to, although I didn't really because I don't really take offense to things, but it did catch my ire, is Xbox Pride Promotions. Now this is on their Xbox Rewards app on the game console, and this is the primary hub. From there they go on to Outright International, which envisions a world where LGBTIQ, I thought it was QI, and they forgot the A2S+. They really fell down on this one. Anyway, it imagines a world where all the gibberish people everywhere enjoy full human rights and fundamental freedoms, exercise self-determination, form strong communities, and thrive personally and economically. This organization has a staff around the world that works with the United Nations, regional human rights monitoring bodies, civil society partners, and the philanthropic and corporate sectors. That's extraordinarily interesting because these people are monitoring and have their tentacles in all the worldwide organizations. Something to know about. They actually say they hold consultative status at the United Nations, where it serves as a secretariat of the UN LGBTI core group. Next up we have GLAAD, the world's largest media advocacy organization, works with television, film, and video games to tell stories and consult on LGBTQ media representation. To cut to the chase, they run advocacy to help ensure 100% inclusion and acceptance of the LGBTQ community. I'm gonna have to make up another word for this. It's getting entirely too many. Finally, the National Center for Transgender Equality. The NCTE envisions a society in which transgender people not only survive, but thrive, with accepting families and communities full of self-determination over their identities and bodies, and freedom for disrespect, discrimination, and violence. For this vision to become a reality, we must also create equity, equal opportunity, safety, health, and economic well-being for all people over their entire lifetimes. So you're spending a lot of money to advocate and work toward things that will never happen. Sorry to tell you, burst your bubble, pop your balloon. I will add that during the Pride promotion, Pride Month, whatever it was, Microsoft also gave away the game Tell Me Why. It's about twins that one of them decides she's a man all of a sudden, rips the entire family apart at every turn. She ends up in a mental health facility, I believe Alaska or Canada or someplace cold. And then it's a dramatic walk through her sister trying to get back together with her and quote unquote accept her. So you might ask, why do I care? As I see it, we have to go back in time a little bit. Here is San Francisco's men's choir singing We'll Convert Your Children back in 2021.
You think we're sinful? You fight against our rights. You say we all lead lives you can't respect. But you're just frightened. You think that we'll corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked. Funny, just this once, you're correct. We'll convert your children. Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it. We'll make them tolerant and fair, just like you worried. They'll change their group of friends. You won't approve of where they go at night to protests. Oh, and you'll be disgusted so gross when they start finding things online that you've kept far from their sight, like information.
Your children will care about fairness and justice for others. Your children will work to convert all their sisters and brothers. Then soon we're almost certain your kids will start converting you. The gay agenda is coming home.
Now, when that caused furor in the open market, they came out and said, well, it was just satire. We were kidding. It was ridiculous. What are you saying? That's stupid. We're just playing with you because you're like meanie pants. And so we just did that as satirical, and it's totally not a thing. We're not after your children. So here is a video of someone called Nimbo on YouTube. And he has this video of that song. And then he lists all those people that were singing in the choir who have been arrested for basically pedophilic activity.
We're coming for them. We're coming for your children.
Bravo 6. Going dark.
So let's get into some meat and potatoes, some definitions. You know I love definitions. We'll start with pride. Now, everybody's running around, pride. Pride in a rainbow, or pride in yourself, or build yourself up. But you won't be suicidal if you just have pride in yourself, and are gay, which means happy, but it doesn't mean happy anymore because you can't say it like it means happy. You gotta say it's gay because it's only gay if you're saying you're happy and gay, but if you're not gay, you can't say it. Yes, it all gets confusing. But pride actually means a sense of one's own proper dignity or value, or self-respect. Well, that video there of the Pride Parade in Toronto, cut by the Daily Caller, that was heavily sponsored by Bud Light, by the way, really shows off their pride and proper dignity, their value, and absolutely their self-respect. Furthermore, pride means pleasure or satisfaction taken in an achievement, possession, or association, like parental pride. Parents are proud of their children when they accomplish something great, like graduating college. Hopefully not when they get those little trophies that say, "I was there!" Because you didn't do anything. You just showed up. Good job. You got out of bed. Another definition would be arrogant or disdainful conduct or treatment, as in haughtiness. Ah, there we go. What a prime example. That's another clip by the Daily Caller. Once again, they're coming for your children.
Another tense moment in New York City when a woman shows up with a sign advocating for biological women's rights.
And of course, in that showing of arrogant or disdainful conduct, or in that woman's case, treatment of her, all these people are attacking her for basically women's rights. Women are women. We don't want men in our changing rooms, etc. We don't want men crushing us in sports because they're just beasts compared to the average athletic woman. And of course, she's berated, assaulted, and eventually that fluffy head gay dude behind her beats the sign out of her hand and runs into the crowd with it. While all the time, she's not punching at them. She is just saying, "Don't touch me. Please don't touch me." But we can't have that because you're at a pride parade, and you should know that decency, dignity, value, or self-respect, those have no place here. Moving on to some all too commonly used terms, we'll go with homophobic. Let's break it down first though. Homo, as a standalone word, in Latin means man or human, but as mansexual only makes sense if you're talking in the manner of a 1950s movie caveman character. We have to go over to the prefix homo, which comes from the Greek word homos, which means same, as in homosexual, same-sexual, or homophobia. Phobia is an irrational fear, a strong fear, dislike, or aversion. So first off, I don't know anybody who is actually afraid of gay or lesbian people. Now, of course, you're going to have a fear of one of these people that's, for example, beating on someone at a pride parade and taking their stuff, running into the crowd. Well, that person is obviously violent and has no self-control and is completely fine with disdainful conduct. So you can have some fear of that. But is it irrational? I mean, they're being violent. Most people don't consider fear of violence necessarily irrational. And then the second part of this definition, a strong fear, I suppose you could have that. I don't know anyone who has a strong fear of gay or lesbians. Probably more like the last part of it, dislike or aversion. That's very common, and honestly, growing in leaps and bounds. Mostly not so much about the people themselves, but the ideology that some of the people are pushing. For example, parents of children in school and their teachers are telling them, you can be anything you want. How about a panda? How about a potato? How about a jet fighter? And then they end up jumping off a roof because they're a jet fighter, so of course they can fly. Well, they should probably dislike that teaching or have an aversion to it so their kids don't go airborne or try to boil themselves for some sort of stew. Here's some fun pictures. Yes, they have been blocked out because, indeed, these pictures are completely naked men wandering around among the children. The second picture here is a bunch of, we'll say, leather daddies with their pups, because pup play is actually a thing. The Secretary of Nuclear Waste for the United States, before he was busted for stealing women's bags at airports, was into pup play and instructing other people on said activities. So these guys with fetishes are crawling along a street during a pride parade with, as you'll notice in the background, a group of children following right along behind them. So really, in all my experiences, I haven't seen a whole lot of phobics. I mean, you want to say arachnophobics? Lots of arachnophobia. First, because of lack of knowledge of arachnids. Well, it's understandable that most parents train their kids not to play with spiders because you never know when they're going to get a hold of a black widow or something. Most of them teach that so their kids don't go running around just grabbing things that might cause problems, which of course makes sense. And so they have not an arachnophobia, but usually it's more of a toxophobia, like a fear of being poisoned or fear of poison, or maybe an algophobia, which is a fear of pain. Or of course you have Dachnophobia, which is a fear of being bitten. For example, many people are afraid of dogs because they don't want a dog to bite them. Spider bites, shark bites, bear bites. Although I dare to say that most people's apprehensions against bears aren't so much like a bear bite, it's more of torsundophobia, which is a fear of being torn asunder expressly by a bear. Now that I've severely deviated from what I was talking about before, I'll try to get back on track. You hear a lot about equality and equity. We heard that in the Xbox promotional breakdowns to try to gin up donations. But there's a huge argument around that because what kind of equality are you looking for? Of course, equity, as explained in one of my other videos, is basically nothing. It's just not really a thing. You can't have equity in life, that is all equal outcomes for every person. You can't have that. It hasn't happened. It's not going to happen. But no matter how you look at it, is the Rainbow Coalition equal? And in what ways are they equal? Well, for one reason, we're all humans. So we should all be treated equally, say, under the law, as humans. That makes sense. I'm fine with that. It's constitutional. It's also biblical. So let's go with that. Are they equal with children? Well, no, because two lesbians or two gays cannot have children. They have to contract with outside sources, like someone who's building them a fence for their backyard, to actually acquire children. And even if they do in vitro, it's only one of their child. Now, you can look at it, of course, well, the other one's just adopting it kind of thing. They're not equal. They're just not. The biology is not there. Now we have laws giving equality to marriages, which the laws give equality on paper, but are the marriages actually equal? Of course not. That's not what marriage was designed for, and most people will argue, rightly so, that marriage is a balancing act. You have one side and the other coming together as one, and they balance each other out. But speaking generally, because you have to speak generally to have anything understood or created or even written into law, men and women are drastically different, and when coming together, they create a balance. Moving on, next up is bias. So bias is a preference or an inclination, especially one that inhibits impartial judgment, or an unfair act or policy stemming from prejudice. So although bias is often used negatively, a preference or inclination, especially one that inhibits impartial judgment, is every single person all of the time. Because judgment is the act or process of judging, the formation of an opinion after consideration or deliberation, or the capacity to assess situations or circumstances and draw sound conclusions. So everybody's making judgments all the time, and of course, because everybody grows up differently, they have different households, they have different environments, they live in different states, the temperature is different. There are things that inherently are going to sway judgment one way or another. There's going to be partiality. No one has impartial judgment, and anybody who says they have impartial judgment is completely lying through their teeth. That's just not a thing. There's entirely too much stuff that we have no idea about the human psyche that causes people to be impartial. So saying that, oh, it's totally negative, you have to be impartial. Nobody's impartial, ever. Just get over that. Now the second one, that is something that can be discussed and argued. An unfair act or policy stemming from prejudice, aside from the fact that everybody has prejudice, much of it, of course, based on judgment, can be creating policy or quote-unquote unfair acts based on said prejudice. For example, I have prejudice against people ransacking stores and robbing them blind. I have prejudice against people who go up and curb stomp a woman's head into the curb. Something popped into my head because it actually happened in the New York subway. Thus, I would advocate for a policy stemming from my prejudice. But then you've got to determine, based on a moral substructure, is that a good prejudice or a bad prejudice? Because not all prejudice is made from the same cloth. Now, most often when it comes to bias, you hear a lot about implicit or explicit, the two separate biases. And they'll use it kind of interchangeably, but kind of not. It depends on who's doing the talking. But implicit is implied or understood, though not directly expressed. So one could take something like pointing at something and saying, I don't know if that's great. That's not directly expressing that I have a bias to that. But people could take from that as an understanding that, I don't really like that. Or of course, explicit, it leaves nothing implied. It's fully or clearly expressed. So that would be someone standing up and saying, that's not good, don't do that, stop what you are doing. It's an explicit bias. Of course, based on some sort of prejudice and impartial judgment. So all the people that are saying, oh, all this stuff is negative, it's negative. All of it has to be taken in context and based on some sort of moral substructure. Often the implicit or explicit bias will be thrown around willy-nilly, and then they'll be including things like, we just want respect. You need to keep your bias to yourself. Okay, well, respect is like trust. It ebbs and flows. You have to, of course, build respect, just like you have to build trust. Now, should you be able to trust people like immediate family? You know, you go home to your wife, you should trust that she's not waiting there with a knife to stab you? Well, of course. But usually that kind of trust is built over time. Usually you don't meet a girl and say, hey, will you marry me? And the next day you get married and you have no idea what you're getting into. And so you just got to automatically, well, I'm married. I guess I trust her now with my life and well-being. Well, no, that's something built up. And of course, in that scenario there, if you came home and your wife tried to stab you, that trust would be lost. Thus, the ebb and the flow respects the same thing. But unlike trust, which can often go up or down in drastic measures, respect more often than not is on a daily basis and is more minor in its movements. For example, I might respect someone or gain respect for someone in the same day because they did something that I thought was impressive, or that, they stood their ground on something and said, nope, I cannot do that. That is bad to do. Build a little respect there. Perhaps within the same hour, they could do something else, and I can say, ooh, I don't know if you should do that. And in that, perhaps lose a little respect, especially if they come back with, you know what, I'm going to do what I want. And of course, people lose or gain respect in different chunks. You respect police if you see that they are doing what they should be doing. You respect your parents even though they make mistakes. But here's a little clip from Fox News, and you can determine for yourself if we should be respecting these people. Oh yeah, they're really vying for respect there. So they're accosting this preacher on the street while he is literally standing there and just praying with the Bible in hand, and they are harassing him. Now that's not the most egregious attack on preachers who go to pride parades or events or something like that and just stand there and pray. And I'm sure there are preachers who are aggressive and, I don't know, throw Bible at people and stuff like that. And that's not correct. I'm not backing that up. That's terrible and they shouldn't do it. If you go out somewhere, just stand in a corner and read the Bible. Should you be accosted for that? You could say, well, maybe I don't like it. But in that video, you heard them saying, we are who we are, God made him that way. That's the common lines there. God made them that way to what? End bloodlines and families? That's really a weird argument. They made him this way. Well, no, they didn't, because you came out of the womb. You weren't assigned a gender. You came out as a gender. You're a male or a female, so that's how you're made. And the objective in being made that way is to join together with the opposite, the balance, to create one. So to follow up with more of the God made them that way, this is a clip from CBS. It's about 4 separate families. I'll address 3 of them. The other one, not really much to say, just kind of vapid jibber jabber. But let's watch.
This is my favorite picture of Namdi. That's my baby, all up in their glory. When they were 16, they came out as gay, but when they were graduating from Stanford last summer, I was made to understand that they were non-binary and their preferred pronouns are they, them, theirs. I was a little shocked and even maybe a little scared. What does that mean? I had to quickly get with the program.
Cooper is gender nonconforming, which means the way he expresses himself to the world is what we stereotypically call female. But he's very adamant he's a boy.
Magdi came up to me and said that she kind of liked boys and girls. We have another son who had told us like 2-3 years before that he was gay, and it was shocking. We got to the point of saying, hey, they're our children. And no matter what they are, we love them, we respect them, and we're going to accept them the way they are.
Quererlos, entenderlos, porque son nuestros hijos y ellos no decidieron venir a nacer en este mundo.
The newborn picture I took of him, he's wearing a blue onesie and he has a football next to him. In my mind, I had Cooper going on the same journey as my older son. Having a child like Cooper has really made me realize that our children are born the way they are.
If your child comes out to you as queer, then you should be glad and thankful that you've created a safe space in your heart and in your home. Homophobia is real, transphobia is real, lesbophobia, all those things are real. But your love and your understanding and your acceptance, to me, is a lethal weapon against those things.
I wish that everybody would respect them as human beings.
40% of children like mine attempt suicide. I decided that I was not going to be my child's first bully, that I was going to be there to support him and make sure that he knew that he was going to survive and thrive.
I'm proud of Namdi because not only have they challenged me, they've also taught me. What I do is empower my child to go out every day and just have no apologies for being bold and black and beautiful.
Yo soy una madre orgullosa. Todo lo que planeé se ha realizado.
Magdi has been a productive citizen, a very loving daughter, and she has made us grandparents.
Cooper is sassy, and he is smart, and he is kind, and he really just embraces life for what it is.
How lucky and blessed are these kids to have parents like that?
They so are.
Such an amazing
story. It is. It's really wonderful to see how supportive they are, and I love what the one parent said, the doctor who said love and understanding is a lethal weapon.
Yeah.
You know?
Parents have expectations for their kids no matter what, and you just have to realize they are who they are. You just need to get out of the way. Just get out of the way.
Okay, so the doctor, the mom, which we don't see anything about a father, so one can lightly assume that it's a single mom. She says she has to get with the program to pretend that her son is now multiple people, which may we note that her son came out as gay when he was 16, okay, but then he went to college and became multiple people. Now, where did he get that idea? Is that just who he was? Are these kids just coming up with their own? Yeah, you know what? I am many people. I am a hydra. Think about that for a minute. Especially since a lot of these people seem to be coming out of the colleges. Also, I will add here, again, the phobias just aren't real. I deal with people all the time. I don't know where these phobic people are. So she goes on about, well, you're scared of it. No, we're really not. I'm not. If you're listening to this, you're probably not. You're a human being. I'm going to treat you like a human being. I'm not scared of whatever deviant activities you're into, but I probably will advise you, maybe that's not beneficial for you, society, for, your quote-unquote children, if you decide to buy some children. Then you have, of course, Cooper, which hits me really hard because this kid is obviously being severely abused. An extremely young child decides that he's gender creative, which isn't even a thing. It's the most made up of all of them, almost. It's gender creative. You can just create a new gender every day because it's all creativity. We're not coloring a book here, all right? We're not playing with Play-Doh. We're not building some sort of Lego castle. You are what you were born to be. This kid is born a boy. That's it. He's a boy. And his mother is actually not only allowing, but encouraging and exacerbating the problem. Is this kid gonna make it past 16 without suiciding himself? That's a real question, because this kid isn't gonna know what he is. He's not being given any sort of foundation as to what he is. He doesn't know. His mom is saying you can be anything. Do any of us think that's actually healthy for children who don't know anything anyway? To be told, oh, you don't know what you are? Well, let me tell you, you can be anything. Yeah, but what am I? Well, you're anything you want. I don't understand. And I'm not going to help you understand because I'm a terrible parent who's going to abuse you. Just like Jazz Jennings' mother, the poster child for transgender ideology, who is severely messed up if you've watched any interviews with Jazz Jennings. Later on, she actually says kids like Cooper are 40% suicidal. So if you have even 40% though, 40% suicidal, you have 100,000 people who are gender creative or LGBTQIA plus two spirit pandas. 40,000 of them are going to either want to or are going to kill themselves. I don't know those kind of numbers in anything else. Although by last year's record number of overall suicides, we might be seeing some of those up and coming if we don't get some sort of actual societal structure. Maybe getting back into religiosity a little more, maybe a little less pride, a little more humility. And then she goes, I don't want to be his bully. You're bullying him by telling him no? Do you know what a bully is? You've obviously never been bullied. You've literally never been bullied. I have many, many times, from many sources, even into adulthood, people that try to bully me, and I'm not having it. But aside from that, when I was elementary, high school, etc., there's bullies all over the place. You're not bullying him by teaching him that he's a boy or telling him no. Gender creativity is not real. You can't just make up whatever gender you want at any given moment. Also, should we stop and ask, where is this kid getting this idea? Because it doesn't seem from that interview that she gave it to him. Her mind, she says, in her mind, she had a boy. But now he's gender creative and fabulous. So who taught him this? At that young age, is he all over the internet? Is he doing his own research on gender studies? Is he, going to daycare or public school? And the last family, it's actually lightly shocking. Not really, because it's getting to be all too common, especially in Hollywood. But it's a little bit shocking. 3 kids, and by the sound of it, they only have 3 kids. Every single one of them is some sort of LGBT identification. Do these kids go to the same school? Do they hang out with the same friends? Do they play the same games on the internet? These are all questions I would like answered before I just accept, oh yeah, it must be genetic. They're just all gay. But in all these, it doesn't really seem like anyone's asking what's going on, especially can the father step up here? I mean, I understand a little bit. I understand. It's a lot of the stuff you see coming from women, a lot more emotional. They want to be loving. They want to be supportive. That is women's natural state. But men often have a tendency to say, no, that's stupid. And the mothers come in and go, don't be that way. That's not nice. And the dads are like, okay. I'm sorry I said it with such a strong tone, but I love you, and that's stupid. But these fathers don't seem to be. Of course, the ones that you actually see, which is only the last Latino father there. The first one doesn't seem to have a father at all. And then the second one, you see one flash of a picture in this video of what one would assume, although it isn't dictated, that the father figure is there to some effect. But in that picture, he is outdoors with his family, kissing his son's head, or at least maybe sniffing his son's head. You can't tell. Why can't you tell? Because there's a COVID mask on him, outside next to his family, for a picture. Well, that's not much of a man anyway, obviously, so maybe that's part of the problem there. Wrapping this up because I'm getting kind of wound up. The commentators say it's wonderful, they're so supporting. You know, parents have expectations for their children, but instead of guiding them in those expectations like you're a boy and you're going to grow up to be a man, as loving parents historically have done, you should just get out of their way and let them choose their own path. Whoa, it's enlightening to see how kids just kind of randomly ebb and flow and do whatever they want because there's no one to guide them and teach them. Can't believe how flexible kids are when you throw them in a river and they just kind of bounce off rocks as they chug on down the river. But back up a little bit in a couple of their statements. They did point out that the doctor lady said, love and understanding is a lethal weapon. And I'd agree with that because it definitely can be. Love and understanding can be a lethal weapon with you defending your family against onslaught, against the pedos in some of the school boards that are trying to indoctrinate the children and get them to chop bits of themselves off. It can be totally lethal. That's something to keep in mind. Of course, it can also be a lethal weapon if you're leading your child down a path of self-destruction. Or, of course, as the commentators are saying, you just kind of let them wander down the path of self-destruction. I think my example of the child in the river, you know, if you throw your child in a river, then, you know, it's love and understanding. That's why I threw them in the river. And they just kind of bounced off all the rocks until they got to the end when they suicided themselves. Because they had no idea what they were. They have no idea where they're going. You're setting up for some very broken children. And I don't think that's going to play out very well. Let's move on to one of the most aggressive and egregious things that I find going on, not only in the United States, but all over the world. But these specifically are focused on the United States. And that is the teachers' unions. Although apparently there's some small regional ones that aren't associated with the bigger ones, most of the teachers' unions are associated with the two largest ones. Those being the American Federation of Teachers, the AFT, led by Randi Weingarten, which if you're paying attention during the COVID debacle, she was the one that was always getting up and screaming about saving the children and grandmas, saying that teachers should be paid more, they should be paid while school is out, and they should never have to go back to work due to safety. Also, that children weren't going to be bothered or held back or have any problems with being out of school for 3 or 4 or 9 or forever. They're going to be fine. We'll just teach them over iPads. That was that lady. She actually went over to Ukraine for some reason to meet with Vladimir Zelensky. I still haven't figured out why. She went over there. I guess she's that important? I don't know. Maybe she's trying to be the Secretary of Education when Biden gets in office next? Who knows? But you might have seen a lot of her. The next, and in my opinion, more egregious, first off, because she's not out there all the time, unlike Randi Weingarten, who's doing interviews and going to Ukraine and getting on the TV and going to protests and stuff. The next one is with the NEA, the National Education Association. And that's Becky Pringle. Now this woman, I think she's more egregious because the stuff that she's doing is more private. She doesn't seem to be getting on all the TV shows and doing interviews. She doesn't seem to be getting out there at all the protests and causing a big public hubbub. And she actually brags about doing a lot of stuff in the background. So I'm going to play a clip here from the NEA meeting this year of 2023. Becky Pringle's the keynote speaker. You're going to get some culty vibes, some screamy vibes. I understand. It's a little bit rough to get through, and it's a little bit long. But if you have grandchildren or children that are associated with or in any sort of public school, you should be keeping in mind while you're watching or listening to this clip that if you are in, say, my state, the South Carolina Education Association, SCEA, is a direct state affiliate of the NEA. Additionally, it has actually teamed up with the AFT, remember Randi Weingarten, to push forward the stuff that she is promoting in this keynote speech. Just based on this clip alone, my kids will never go to public school. Let's watch.
With 3 million members strong, in households all across this nation, it is our duty to lead in the magnificent and complex constellation that is public education. In the coming days, we will learn as we lean into what's possible. We will deliberate as we make the decisions that will guide our work ahead. We will leave this space inspired by new ideas and insights, diverse experiences, and newfound expertise. NEA, our struggle for freedom will never rest. We have come here to Florida, our nation's ground zero for shameful, racist, homophobic, misogynistic, xenophobic rhetoric and dangerous actions. We have come here because our children are here. We have come here because our colleagues are here. We have come to Florida because educators and students and their communities are being attacked by laws that threaten their safety and question their humanity, that block their access to every basic right that defines the word freedom. We stand ready to lift up and protect our colleagues and their students. And right here in Florida, we will preserve and strengthen a democracy that was steeped in the power of the Constitution of the United States of America. It is we, the people, NEA, we the people, all of us deserve the right to be truly free. Right here, we will get that done. In this moment, in this state, where the LGBTQ plus community, especially those who are transgender, face relentless attacks, we will fight for the right of every student and every educator to stand completely in their authenticity of who they know themselves to be. In this moment, when voting rights hang in the balance, when reproductive rights are at risk, we are required to fight for fair and free elections and a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. NEA, in this moment, with the residue of the pandemic still lingering, with our psyches still fragile, we must make sense of all that we have lost and all that we have learned. In this moment, when your professional responsibility and your academic freedom to teach the truth of this nation's history and its impact to this day can actually cost you your license or your job or your life. I will always remember the tearful yet defiant Florida educator who expressed the concerns of far too many. telling me I can't teach like this. I refuse to. NEA, in this moment, when an extremist, out-of-touch Supreme Court slammed shut the doors of affirmative action, refused to acknowledge the way student loan debt puts higher education out of reach for so many students, and keeps millions of Americans from experiencing financial freedom in their lifetimes. During a 24-hour period, this radical court struck yet another blow against our LGBTQ+ community with a decision for the first time ever that actually licenses discrimination under the First Amendment against a protected class. So this is that moment that requires us to remind the nation that compounded inequities continue to affect far too many of our students and educators, far too many of our families and communities, because inequity is based into every single social system in this country. We must call out every politician and every pundit who refuses to address gun violence. Who seek to erase the beautiful stories of indigenous people, of our Latino and API communities, who refuse to acknowledge the right of our trans students to live their true identities. We must raise our voices right now and say no. No! No! You will not arm teachers. No! You will not shrink our students' curriculums. No! You will not leave them unprepared to lead a just society. No! Since becoming your NEA president, I have visited you in your schools, and I've got the chance to meet your brilliant and beautiful students. Pennsylvania. Their hard work convinced a bipartisan group of lawmakers to introduce legislation that creates a stipend for student teachers. In states nationwide, our students are marching to end gun violence. Our students are returning banned books to their libraries. Our students are calling on the adults in positions of power to make decisions that will center their humanity and invest in their futures. We will set our gaze on the North Star of our shared vision, that we will unite not just our members, but this entire nation to reclaim public education as a common good, as the foundation of this country, and then we will transform it into something it was never designed to be, a racially and socially just and equitable system that prepares every student, everyone to succeed in a diverse and interdependent world. NEA, you are those stars in the darkness. Your light will not be dimmed. Your purpose will drive you in a righteous fight for freedom because you know who you are.
That's right. Yes.
You know who you are. You are the NEA.
Now you can take that as you will. I personally take that as pure self-aggrandizing psychosis. This chick's crazy, and she's essentially overhaul the schools and children. The link to the full video is in the video description here, so you can go and watch that on YouTube, and I highly recommend you do. She brags graphically and openly about all the stuff that they have pushed through in various states, raucously praising many of the things that I personally would not back and be aggressively against. But I tell you what, with all this summer of Pride, I think it's time for a change of seasons.
And as you heard, I have declared a summer of Pride. We need to work all summer, and then I'm going to declare an autumn of Pride, so get ready.
Oh, Richard, you're back. But now that that's out of the way, I think it would be a bit remiss to not mention the churches that have fallen away from actual biblical ideology. The ones that are succumbing to the LGBT, PIQ, whatever the nonsense, that liturgy. They're just collapsing under it. And they're attempting, mostly poorly, to try and justify it with biblical references. Not to say that the churches themselves don't do that with the biblical texts, just on their own accord. And that's not good at all either. That is something that should be addressed and weeded out. That is a problem. But I'm talking right now specifically of the LGBT liturgy and the LGBT religion that is working its way into other religions. To start this off, here's a pic of a United Methodist Church in New Orleans. As you know by my first episode, I was there not terribly long ago, and let me tell you, there was Pride stuff everywhere, including on multiple of the churches. This one was the most robust and bold of the churches, I think. And of course you see there on their banner the colloquialism of y'all means all, and then the big hearts because they love the rainbows and they love the LGBT community and stuff. And if that were love the sinner, not the sin, then I could agree with that. I don't hate any of these people. I don't hate any of the alphabet soup. I don't. Not as people. If you are aggressive, get in my face and tell me that I have to call you a woman if you're a man, I'm not going to do that. But I don't hate you because you have had some sort of mental trauma in your past and just don't know what you are. Because you're that previous kid in the video, Cooper, and whose mother is abusing him and saying you can be gender creative. You can be whatever you want. I don't hate you because you went through that. I actually feel bad. I want to talk it out. Maybe get you hooked up with someone that can help you work out some of the issues you have. Because you chopping pieces of you off is not beneficial for you, and it's also not beneficial for society. It's not beneficial for the people around you. But this is not a huge surprise to me because although it's not getting much media play or news play that I know of or have seen, the United Methodist Church is kind of collapsing in on itself as an organization. There are multiple United Methodist church branches, we'll call them, little campuses associated with the United Methodist, contracted as it were, that are actually trying to separate from the United Methodist organization as a whole, because United Methodist is actually uplifting this type of activity. Come on in, do whatever you want, be whatever you want. We're not going to judge you. Okay, well, as we spoke earlier, you are going to judge people one way or another. You're going to judge them negatively or you're going to judge them positively. That doesn't mean you're going to judge them negatively and hate them. You're not going to abuse them, but you are going to judge them one way or another. Nobody is neutral. But there are multiple branches of United Methodist that are actively trying to pull away, and the head organization is apparently giving them a lot of runaround. They won't just let them leave. They're saying, okay, you can leave, but you've got to pay us this amount of money to be able to break your contract. We get to keep your church and land, and then you can take all the people who don't like what we're doing with all this Rainbow Coalition stuff and trans stuff, and you can just go find another place to church. And this is according to multiple articles that I've read related to this. That might not be 100% accurate because, of course, those people being interviewed for the articles may be exaggerating. They might be leaving stuff out. They might be changing information. I don't know. But once you have so many people saying similar things, you can usually build a Lego tower and say, oh, they're kind of connected. Maybe United Methodist as an organization are not sticking to their original moral substructure. I do know that United Methodist has brought in some trans pastors, priests, whatever they call them, teachers. I don't have time to go over them. You'd have to look them up yourself. But there's some crazy stuff out there. And I kind of see if these people are associating themselves with United Methodist, and then you have the other people complaining about who the United Methodists are embracing as an organization, you can generally put two and two together and you can pretty much figure out that there's some rifts happening, which I'm not Methodist, but I think is extraordinarily sad, and I don't like to see that happen. That is not good for that organization. That's not good for the outlook on religion itself in a world that is becoming more and more secularized. Now, in the links below the video, I have a link to an article to something from the Human Rights Campaign, which is an extraordinarily leftist, out-of-their-mind organization. So this article is about the bad old Catholic Church and how they teach tolerance of the sinner, but not the sin, which of course is accurate, and it's being presented in a negative light because how dare they say that there's anything sinful. I have another article linked, I believe that was linked from the Human Rights Campaign article, over to Waterloo Catholics. And it actually gives a real breakdown of the Catholic teaching about gays and lesbians being Catholic. Now in that article, I couldn't find anything about trans, which I found was very pointed. So you can be gay and lesbian and Catholic, but under certain circumstances, you won't be in good standing until you change those ways to follow the teachings of the church, which of course makes sense because you have to have a structure to have an organization, to have a religion, to have a faith. If your faith is just all over the place, you don't actually have a faith. You just exist and go to a building to have a cracker and drink some grape juice. I will address the elephant in the room, or the maps in the room, as some people wants to call the minor attracted people nowadays. The Catholic Church has a long-running issue with scandals regarding molesting children, especially boys, pedophilia and stuff, which is true. But I'm going to counter that with the United States government did their own research into the public school system. The U.S. government, I believe the Federal Education Department, did a study, and the amount of molestation and pedophilia running around the public school system makes the occasional stuff that pops out about the Catholic Church on the news look like nothing ever happens in the Catholic Church. The numbers in the public schools are so egregiously high, and they know it. It is mind-boggling. Furthermore, I want to take a moment to talk about Ken Green, a professional golfer that, in, I believe, an RV accident caused him to lose his leg. Now, Ken Green has a really brutal backstory as a child, in that his family moved around, his father was an alcoholic, and his father's friends were pedophiles. And so, you can read all this in the article in the video description. I will throw it out there that this is pretty brutal. Harden your stomach. This kid is severely abused in multiple ways. And he's not gay, but he has his entire life apparently had massive issues with lashing out, violent anger issues, etc., etc. Now, he was molested by men, so of course there's more of a chance, if things coincide mathematically, that he's not going to be attracted to men, since he does see it as trauma and a negative. But what if Ken Green was a girl? Would she be more adverse to any sort of interaction or relationship with men, as she was so brutally abused? I think that's something to actually maybe muddle over a little bit. Could it be that she might be more inclined to actually be lesbian? There's a positive and negative connections in people's brains, and everyone breaks and is rewired differently by various things in their life. So now on to the piece de resistance, in my humble opinion, of this video and podcast today. And I'm including this clip because it's something of a guidepost. All the issues I've talked about with the churches, with schools, etc. I think this can actually be applied to more than just churches, even though this is specifically about the churches. But listen to this, see what you think, and I'll comment on it momentarily.
Read a story a while back that really shook me up. You can find it online. The title of the article is Two Lesbians Walk into a Church. It's by a pastor, gospel teaching, gospel believing guy, John Burke. He wrote a book called Unshockable Love. The article comes from that book. The article tells a story about a girl named Amy, young woman named Amy. She's a lesbian. She's in a relationship with another young woman named Rachel. They don't go to church. They have very little spiritual interest whatsoever, but Amy wakes up one day and just out of the blue she says, "Hey, Rach, let's go to church today." And Rachel's like, "Church? We hate church and they hate us. Like, why would we go to church?" And Amy says, "Well, come on, it'll be fun. It'll be fun." Their motto, and this is the motto at John's church, "Come as you are." Their motto is come as you are, but we know that means come as you are as long as you're not gay. Push pause. Like, you can be an alcoholic, you can be struggling with drug addiction, you can be greedy, you can be living with your boyfriend. But if you're gay, the rules change. Amy says, look, if we show up and they know that we're lesbians, if they act disgusted and they shun us, we'll show them that their faith is a fraud. So they go to church. And as Amy tells the story, she says, I came on a mission to shock people. So Rachel and I would hold hands. We would sit, snuggle up close to each other, like arms around each other. She said, but instead of the disgusted looks of contempt that we expected, people met eyes with us and treated us like real people. Push pause. First, when I read that, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like the church treated them like real people. But then my heart sank at the word expected. They expected looks of disgust. They expected to be shunned. They expected to be shunned by people who, by no virtue of their own, were plugged into the lifeline of grace. They expected to be shunned by people who know they deserve nothing but judgment, but who have found grace and forgiveness and salvation through the grace of Jesus. How does that work? But Amy said, instead of the disgusted looks of contempt, people met eyes with us and they treated us like real people. So we started going to church every week. We kept moving closer to the front each week, still trying to get a reaction. Get this, so that we would be rejected sooner or later. But she said we couldn't shock people. So we stopped trying to shock people. And I started learning. Somewhere in there, Rachel broke it off with Amy, and Amy kept going to church. And she said, the more I listened and learned about the teachings of Jesus, the more I started to actually believe that God really did love me. She says, and in time, the more I believed that God could actually see something of value in me, the more I trusted him. She said, in time, as I continued to seek intimacy with Jesus, the lesbian struggles fell away. Amy got saved. She embraced Jesus. Why? Because she encountered the unconditional, humanizing love in Jesus, embodied in the unconditional, nothing else like it in this world, love of his followers. She got saved, and today, Amy is on staff with that church, helping others to recover from all kinds of sexual and relational struggles. Never underestimate the power of loving people unconditionally. Never underestimate the power of walking in the way of Jesus. Mercy before judgment, grace before truth. Never underestimate what God can do through a local church that seeks to be the physical, tangible presence of Jesus to people in their community. This is the word of the Lord.
Now that you just heard is Charlie Boyd, one of the teaching pastors at Fellowship Greenville in South Carolina. And if that's not a love the sinner, not the sin message, if that's not a guidepost for churches that are wavering, that are falling, that are kind of losing their way, I'm not really sure what is. It doesn't get much more blatant than that. I don't have a link to that article he was referencing, but as he said, it's on the internet. You can look it up if you'd like. But I find it something to think about. If the faith, the churches, the moral substructures, the foundations that are required to keep the families together, I mean the foundation of the United States itself, if those foundations go away and they lose their solidity, if the churches are just like any organization, public schools, the governments, the Washington D.C. library system, why do we even have them at all? If what you hear and learn in the churches is all the exact same thing you hear and learn in the public school system, then why are we wasting time and money on the churches? They're all preaching the same thing. Becky Pringle and Randy Weingarten, they can be the new preachers. As you heard earlier, they seem up for it. I'll tell you, I was talking to a guy, started the conversation by complimenting my American hat and funny shirt that's making fun of pronouns. We got to talking, crazy stuff in the world. Crazy! Through all that, I started talking about the rainbow and how it's been overtaken. I said maybe we should take the rainbow back. Maybe we should have some humility, not have pride, not everything laden with pride. And I was telling him it's interesting because you see rainbows everywhere, and there are actually people that are apprehensive about wearing rainbows or rainbow colored things because they don't want to be associated with the pride movement, which is so aggressive and so negative and so anti-God. And I said maybe we should start wearing more rainbows. Maybe we should take it back and create our own iconography and say, no, the rainbow is not yours. It's not sexual deviancies. It's not a whole bunch of different colors and a whole bunch of different genders and a whole bunch of different identities smacked into one thing. If anything, it's about humility. It's about a promise from God. And he looked at me for a second, just before the doctor called so he can go see an ultrasound of his soon-to-be newborn grandson. And he got up, turned around, and said, "You know what? You might be onto something there. That's a pretty good idea." And then he walked off to be with his family. Thanks for listening, and talk to you later. So there's an upcoming biopic about Leonard Bernstein, who's being portrayed by Bradley Cooper, who was recently attacked for being anti-Semitic by putting on a prosthetic to look more like Leonard Bernstein, who he is portraying in a movie. And pretty much everyone said that's nonsense. But I'm not sure if it's as much nonsense as the appropriation of terms and the banning of use of those terms for anything other than what you have dictated them to be. For example, Leonard Bernstein's work on West Side Story with the song I Feel Pretty, because apparently you're no longer allowed to say the word gay unless you're referencing someone who is sexually attracted to the same sex. Well, I say no to that. I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty and witty and gay, and I pity anyone who isn't me today. Thanks for listening. Casual Reality is a production of Casual Media, LLC, copyright 2023.